If you're not black, what are you?
And it is clear that racism continues to be an issue on both sides of the Atlantic.
The founders of our nation, with all of their flaws, had brilliant ideas about the benefits of an educated citizenry.
The year is 1991, and I'm relatively new to the United States. I'm a student from Malaysia on a scholarship provided by a liberal arts college, and this for me is an incredible breakthrough. My history growing up as an ethno-racial minority in a country that was formerly a British colony had already provided me many experiences with racial discrimination and exclusion by my fellow Malaysians and by the Malaysian government. So imagine my surprise when I was approached by a group of African-American women activists on campus asking me to join something called the Black Cultural Center. Am I allowed to join this? I asked. Why not? One of the women replied. I'm not black, I replied, continuing to be puzzled. And then the black woman activist looked at me and asked me a profound question. It's an unsettled question and one that I've taken very seriously, and one that would come to shape almost a 3-decade journey in researching the archives and stories of political blackness. Well, she retorted, if you're not black, what are you? In the context of Britain, where I've done my research on political blackness, the development of political blackness took place as the peoples of its empire, from Jamaica, India, Pakistan, Trinidad, Guyana, Ghana, Malaysia, exercised their rights as colonial citizens to migrate and settle in Britain. Their arrival not as so-called illegal immigrants, but as people who had rights as British subjects to reside and work in the post-World War II era was soon recast as a racial panic. The presence of black British subjects became increasingly imagined as a nervous threat to the country's separate and preeminent citizenry, white Britons. Enoch Powell, a conservative politician, Sanskrit scholar, and a one-time aspirant to the role of Viceroy of India, propelled the rhetoric in these terms. In 15 or 20 years' time, the black man will have the whip hand over the white man. This inverted fear of a racial peril did not take into account the smaller number of non-white colonial citizens arriving in Britain relative to the much larger numbers of white Britons emigrating to settler colonial countries like Australia, New Zealand, Canada. Many British prime ministers would make careers with this newfound anti-black immigration discourse, from Winston Churchill, who warned that Britain would become a racially miscegenated magpie society, to Margaret Thatcher, who claimed that white Britons were being swamped by culturally different immigrants, to David Cameron, who described desperate human beings trying to cross the English Channel as a swarm of people. This political narrative eventually became mainstreamed. Both the left-wing and the right-wing political parties embraced more and more restrictive anti-immigration laws and sought to outdo one another in closing the doors of immigration and asylum seeking. It is an unbroken thread that connects us to the anti-Syrian refugee sentiments that were mobilized to fuel the Brexit vote in 2016. Racialized anti-immigration animus became normalized in official policy and on the streets. This is the context that fuels the cyclical waves of racial attacks, murders, and the racial profiling of Afro-Caribbean, South Asian, and Muslim communities. Black bodies socially distinguished from white Britons and excluded through the forgetting of the many entanglements of empire were transformed into objects that could be attacked and violated by racists and by the police. In the face of this history of violence in the East London borough of Newham, people from many different backgrounds came together and worked together. The murder of Akhtar Ali Baig, a Pakistani student killed by a group of white racists who took a 5-pound bet on who among them could be the first to kill a Paki, was a catalyst.